This video assumes that you've watched the other two videos on how to set up an ASP.NET MVC project, how to modify the home page and the layout page, how to add the BMI calculator and use it in a web page. So in this video we're going to be looking at the distance converter and adding a web page or modifying a web page for that. Now this version of the distance converter doesn't use enumerations where it should ideally, and there are marks for using enumerations. At the moment I'm using 3 string constants. But the key thing is that the from distance, to distance, from unit and to unit are all public and have got getters and setters. Also the calculate method in the distance converter is also public. Okay, in the previous video we did set up a distance converter web page or view, and since then I have now modified it. So typically it does have a header, and what I've added is the model. So the model is going to be the distance converter from App01. And I'm also using the App01 namespace. So the form is much the same as it was in the BMI calculator. It's a method post. It's got a heading, convert from, and then we're using a drop-down list of 3 options to select either miles, meters or feet. And this would have to be changed if you were using enumerations. I've also done it the simple way by putting these options in manually. There is a more sophisticated way of generating a drop-down list using a select list or an enum drop-down list helper. So there are 2 other ways of doing this, but I've kept it simple for this video. And also I like using the placeholders, but the problem is if they have a value in them, then you can't see the placeholder prompt, in this case from distance. So I'm mixing now HTML and C#, and I'm checking. If the from distance is 0, this is the first time the user is running this page, then the value will be nothing. There'll be no value, and therefore we'll see the placeholder. If, however, they put a from distance in, that's what we'll see instead. We'll see the from distance and not the placeholder. And then the convert to is very similar. Got a list of options, and then I'm using a text box to output the to distance, although you could use an ordinary string. You don't have to have a text box, but I thought it was symmetrical, so I've used a text box. Same principle here. If there's a value in the text box, you won't see the placeholder. If there's no value, you will. And I'm checking that with a 0 to distance. To print out the final to distance, I am limiting it to 2 decimal places, because otherwise you get quite a lot of decimal places. And there's our button. So if I run that to just show you what it looks like. Okay, so you can select miles, meters or feet. You can put a from distance in, and you can convert it to miles, meters or feet. Now there's no to distance yet. We have to click on the calculate button, and then the to distance appears. Okay, and if we look at the home controller, you'll see this time there is only one distance converter method, and it has a parameter, a distance converter has a parameter, that's where the data model comes from. So first time round, when this method runs for the first time, there'll be no from distance. So we'll only calculate the distance if the from distance is greater than 0. And we'll pass the distance converter into the view. And that's all there is to it. I'll just show you it running, I think. If I put a breakpoint in there and run it. So first time, if we look at the converter, you'll see from distance is 0, to distance is 0, but we have got a from unit, a default from unit and a default to unit. If I continue, now it goes to the web page. We can put a from distance in and calculate the to distance. So it's come back here for a second time. Now if we look at the converter, we still haven't got a to distance, but if I step on, it now is going to call the calculate distance method. Now if we look at the converter, it now has a to distance, and it goes back to the web page with the to distance. Okay, so as you can see, the hard work was doing the BMI calculator. This one was somewhat easier, but the difference being the need for these drop-down lists. So I'm going to change this version to use enumerations, and we'll see that in a minute. I have now refactored the distance converter. You can see the from unit and the to unit are now distance units, and distance units is a straightforward enumeration. Straightforward enumeration. And they have been set to initial values in the constructor, miles and feet. So going to the HTML then, we still use a select, HTML select. What I didn't realize was you didn't have to do, I think I had this before, at model dot from unit. It will just accept from unit, and if you misspell it, it will check that out and eventually tell you that it can't recognize the property. So that's the same. ASP4, the from unit, I've made it required, and then it's going to get ASP items, the drop-down list option items, from this HTML get enumerate select list, and takes the distance units as the source. So that provides us a list of values from the distance units enumeration. Otherwise this is much the same. The second one uses ASP items, and it works in exactly the same way. We don't need the breakpoint now. Okay, and there we are. These drop-down lists are now coming from the enumeration. Notice the no unit is there. I have a feeling though, if we do that, it's not going to work. No, I think it's still... There's no error message, but I think if we do meters to meters also, that doesn't work either. So there are still one or two little glitches in there that should have been ironed out, but anyway, that will do me. Okay, so we've seen how we can add a mobile web front end to apps 1 and 2. We'll also be doing a final one to App03, but that'll be in a later weeks. A final thought. With these enumerations, you can annotate them using the system component model data annotations. So for example, if you don't want no unit with no space, you want no unit with a space, because it's more user friendly, you can do that. And then, having done that, when you run your drop-down list, you will see there, look, no unit with a space is available now. We don't need to do it to the other enumeration values, but if you want an alternative name for each of the values, you can now have them in this web HTML page.